Hello, everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Ambo. Ambo is one of our Discord community members, and he is from Germany. It's the first time that we've had a guest on the podcast who is not from Canada or the continental US. And I know that based on our listener stats, that the vast majority, over 65% of you, are from the United States, with the other double-digit percentages from Canada and the United Kingdom. So I'm extremely excited to have Ambo here with us to share a bit about what Airsoft is like in another part of the world, and in particular, to talk about his experience at a Milsim event called Borderwar. Now, for the uninitiated, Borderwar is an award-winning 50-hour Milsim held near Prague in the Czech Republic, also known as Czechia. This year was their 14th edition, so 14 years of Borderwar, with planning for Borderwar 15 already underway. It's a really large event. Typically, in the past, you've seen players from all over the world, over 31 different countries in the past. And it's an event that is welcoming to both new players as well as returning player. And many airsofters in Europe consider Borderwar the premier Milsim event. And so it's no surprise to see European content creators such as Novrich, for example, be in attendance. But I'll let Ambo talk about it a bit more. So Ambo, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Well, my first question for you is about your history with Borderwar. So how many, because I said, I said in the intro, they've done 14 editions. So how many of those editions have you played? And sort of what got you into Borderwar in the first place?
Yeah, so at the end of August this year, this was my third Borderwar. I went 2020, 2021, and now 2022. Unfortunately, I did not experience Borderwar before COVID because the event was a lot bigger then. So with regulations in the Czech Republic, they had to limit the event size to a maximum of, I think, 1,000 players. Before that, they sometimes even had 2,000 plus players there.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, I can't talk about any experience with that since I haven't experienced it. So what got me into the event? Basically, videos and the desire to finally go to a big event. Like you said, Borderwar is one of the biggest, if not the biggest event in Europe. And it's just like the place to go for a large event.
Right. And so you live in Germany, and so this was in Czech Republic or Czechia. So what was the preparation for you like? Like, how long did it take you to get there? How do you get there? Like, how did that work for you?
So since I'm in the south of Germany, southeast. It took me about, total driving time was 5 hours with stops, maybe 6.5 hours.
Okay.
And my preparations for it, well, to be honest, I lost a lot of weight since last year.
Okay.
It wasn't especially for Borderwar, but Airsoft was actually a big motivating factor for me. And I really felt that this was a good thing for me when I played this year. Also, I started running again. In the past, I was into running. I did run a lot, but then I stopped and gained a lot of weight. What I did not do this year for preparation was rucking. The last 2 years, I always did a lot of rucking beforehand. So 7 kilometers with a 20-kilo ruck. In about an hour and 15, something like that.
Oh, wow.
I did that often to prepare myself for the event. I didn't do that this year. It was a mistake. Should have done it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, then the other thing I did to prepare for it, the company leader of the company I was in the last 2 years and this year as well, he set up a WhatsApp group for all the team and platoon leaders. And I was in there as well. And this was also good because we could plan things beforehand. We did fix that my teammates and another team who we are friends with were allowed to play recon for our company, which I really wanted to do. And the other thing I tried to prepare for was getting my radio equipment in shape, because We had a bit of communications problems last year.
Mm-hmm.
It worked out better this year, but still not perfectly.
Right, of course.
And then, of course, I had to pack all my stuff. So my regular airsoft gear, of course. So
Mm-hmm.
my rifle, I did also take a backup rifle just in case something went down, which luckily didn't happen. Plate carrier, helmet, uniforms, all that stuff. Then I took a tent with me
Oh, well, okay.
to sleep in. Because at Borderwar, you have either the option to sleep in base camp or on camping grounds outside of the play area. But either way, you need your own tent or some other thing to sleep under.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they only allow tents in, let's call it, military colors. So basically, olive, tan, black is okay. If you have a civilian tent in like red, orange, whatever, you have to pull a tarp over it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have like a cheap used tent from the French army, which is okay. So no problem there. And then I took the tarps and to just like have a place to stand when it's raining. I took like a cooker, food for 3 days. They have catering there, but I didn't want to walk all the way to off zone just to have something to eat. So I took my own food,
Mm-hmm.
cooked it in the cooking area in the base camp, and also a bunch of water.
Okay.
They have water containers there where you can refill your water for free. But um, they recommend to have a minimum amount of water to just in case the containers run empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they recommend a minimum of 3 liters. I went with, I think, 10 liters of water and then like 3 or 5 liters of like soft drinks.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I
So
guess
that's
you're not carrying all that water with you on the field all the time. Like that stays at your base camp in your tent
yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. It stays in your base camp and you carry into the field how much you think you need. I'd recommend like at least 3 or 4 liters,
Yeah.
possibly even 5.
Yeah. So how does Border War work exactly? Can you, because I understand, like you sent me some of the brief, I was looking through some of the documentation, and I know that there's more than 2 teams. So could you explain a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, sure. There's an overarching story that changes every few years. So you usually have like 2 to 3 years, which have the story in like the same imaginary place of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it's usually about two borders in 2 countries in sort of a border conflict. And one country sends its modern military force, which is the task force, and the other funds like local resistance fighters, which is the militia. And then there are 2 different PMC units, which can be bought by the factions, but they have their own missions, objectives, etc. So sometimes they have to do like VIP protection, or they are there to protect the village, which is also a different faction, the civilians. They basically play as NPCs. They offer a lot of role play elements to the game. And then there are also bandits, which are very few in numbers. They are basically look like civilians, but they are armed and try to steal like resources and stuff like that. But I've never interacted with them before. And some events even had another group, the so-called CN observers, which is basically UN peacekeepers slash blue helmets, and but they weren't a faction this year.
Okay. So when you sign up for the event, do you select the faction that you want to be a part of, or is it only open to certain people, or how does that work?
You generally can select the faction you want to be a part of, so you have to buy a faction ticket.
Okay.
So you cannot easily change from one faction to the other, but you buy a ticket for that faction. And before the event, you will also get information that is specific for that faction. For example, in your war node, there will be a list of like enemy commanders and other persons of interests that you should capture if possible.
Okay.
And also, there are some factions like the PMC and the Task Force Special Forces, which you can also just sign up to, but are heavily recommended for experienced players.
Okay.
Because they have the PMCs have a lot of role play in it, and the Task Force Special Forces, they are in the field the entire time. So they have no base camp, but instead they carry all their gear they need, set up a patrol base somewhere, conduct patrols or raids from there, come back to the patrol base, gather up their stuff, move to the next one. Yeah, so they have to carry all their stuff, and therefore it's recommended for experienced players.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. One of the things as well that I was when I was looking through the rules that I thought was interesting was that there's a big emphasis in the rules about no solo play. Like you should never do anything alone. You should never go anywhere alone. And I've even seen in certain cases that players can be reported for doing that. Like if you're and here I'm not talking about like, oh, my teammate got hit and now by myself. I mean someone who actively goes to do things by themselves like a lone wolf. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is that a problem that you've seen?
Honestly, I don't really know. Like, didn't see something like that. I think it's mostly a safety thing. So they want you to always have a buddy with you because the area is pretty big, and if something happens to you at some point and you're deep in the woods, worst case you might be in some hole or something, or like a valley, and you can't reach anybody by radio, and you have, I don't know, you hurt your foot and you can't get up the hill to reestablish radio contact.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
I think it's about safety and also about keeping the units and companies together for gameplay reasons. Yeah, solo play is the only time I really saw solo play happening is usually on Sunday morning, because Sunday morning many people already start packing up their stuff and don't play anymore. So then sometimes people go out alone, but also they usually are in groups, so small groups that go out on their own.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, one more question about the gameplay before we talk about your actual experience over the
Yeah,
weekend.
sure.
So I think, and this is particularly, I think, relevant for people who are like us, like in Canada and the United States. The vast majority of airsofters speak English, right? And in Canada and the US in particular, they only speak English, right? Whereas what you were just saying about Borderwar, I mean, you've got people coming from all around Europe speaking multiple different languages. And I know that being bilingual or speaking many languages, yourself speaking, German and English, is much more common in Europe than it is in North America. But I'm curious, how does Borderwar get around that? Because I'm sure there must be some unilingual people who show up to play airsoft at Borderwar.
So the official event language is English. Therefore, it's heavily recommended for you to speak English. But they do sort companies by language. So, for example, we had the company I was in was Alpha Company, which consisted of Germans, Austrians, and Swiss people from the German-speaking part of Switzerland. And also we had a group of Romanians in our company who did not speak German, but they wanted to be in Alpha because of previous experience they had with Alpha Company. Then I think Romeo Company had French-speaking people, so French, Belgians, also Swiss, and squad leaders and above should speak English. So if you just are like your regular player, no problem. If you don't speak English, your squad leader will very likely speak your language, and your immediate teammates will as well. But if you are a squad leader or even more so platoon or company leader, you have to be able to speak English. But for example, in our company, Alpha Company, we did most of the stuff in German, and only the commands for the Romanian players were in English, or when our company leaders communicated with headquarters. So even if you don't speak English, it's not that big of a problem.
That's really interesting. Any problems as a consequence of language barriers?
Yeah, they usually arise if you play together with like people on the same side, so also other task force players, but who are in different companies. So I don't know, it was last year or 2 years ago. I had a situation where I basically had in my broken French explained to a group of French players that, hey guys, stop shooting at those people over there. They are task force as well. Like, yeah, I know they are wearing like gear that's very on the edge of the regulations, but like they are task force as well. Don't shoot them.
Interesting.
So it happens sometimes that you have problems, but usually you will find a way around it. Also, because people usually are in teams, and one person in the team will usually be able to speak English.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So enough about like the gameplay setup. Let's talk about your experience at Borderwar. So tell us a little bit about sort of how this year went for you, like showing up in some of the games and etc.
Um, I was super happy with this year, even though it rained a lot. Because when we played our first Border War as our team 3 years ago, we met the guys who were already doing recon, and we thought, man, that's super cool. We want to do that as well. Last year, it unfortunately didn't work because Alpha Company was too small to spend that many people on recon.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, my teammate and I, we could finally join the recon team, um, which I absolutely loved. Like um, that was what I wanted to do. And a total highlight for me was when we were on reconnaissance patrol. And we split up into two-man teams. So we were four in total, and we split up into two-man teams. My teammate and I, we got into contact. And basically what we did, we jumped up, fired a few shots, and started a mad dash in the other direction. So to break off contact. And the enemies didn't follow because I think they were like, okay, we saw two people, but we don't know, are there more? What happens there? We don't know. They didn't follow. We got into a safe position, waited there for some time, and then moved back up. And when we were back in position, the other two-man team, they got sort of noticed, but not spotted. There was one or two enemy players who thought, okay, someone is there, but we don't know, and started basically firing shots just into the brush to maybe hit someone. And we stayed completely still until they lost interest. So we laid there on the ground, only trusting our camouflage, just waiting, like, what happens now? Do we have to jump up and fight against a much larger group against whom we basically have no chance? Or do they lose interest? And then at some point, the lost interest turned the other way around, because then a large task force group showed up from the other direction. And they turned that way and started fighting them.
Mm-hmm.
So we fell into their backs.
Oh, wow.
Because we were maybe 50, 60 meters away from them when they turned around. And when we were sure, okay, they are occupied, we got up, slowly moved closer, and started getting them. But then, unfortunately, after we got a group of them, the other task force team thought we were enemy reinforcements and started shooting at us as well. And I got team killed. But my other three teammates, they made it out of there. I had a nice chat with some of the other task force players who were also hit. I think they were from Hungary, but I'm not entirely sure. And yeah, we walked back to base together because we didn't have medics there. And I couldn't get medicked.
That sucks. Oh,
yeah, but it was a lot of fun. It was adrenaline pumping after like hours of, I think at that point we were roughly around 2 hours just walking through the bush, sneaking, being stealthy. And then that situation where the adrenaline pumps and you rush and you get someone, and then, it happens that you are got hit, but who cares? It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that mission that you were on, was that a mission that was given to you by your team leader, or how did you get assigned to do that?
Yeah, it works like that. HQ in the morning gives out the operations to the company commanders. In that case, they had different parts of the border, which was running between the two states of the game scenario, where we should basically all, I don't know if all task force companies, but many, I think 3 or 4 task force companies should cross the border into enemy territory to secure something. And the companies were put on different places where they are supposed to be, different operational areas. And our job was basically to go the long way around. So we are behind the expected enemy, which did work out. Unfortunately, we weren't on the same height as our company. So we wanted to get on the same height as Alpha Company. But when we had this engagement, we were still on the same height with Charlie Company, who of course didn't know that there are friendlies in that area.
Right.
And that will probably also have played a big part in the in the friendly fire incident. And yeah, so basically your company leader gets the mission, and then it's up to them how they have structured their platoons, how they communicate with their platoon leaders. I think the company leader in the German company does it pretty well. It's, I think, his 3rd or 4th year as company leader. And he that usually gave a briefing to his platoon leaders and to us as the recon team. And then we as the recon team, we just started going out. So as soon as we got our briefing, we came completely ready to the briefing and then marched out of base. While the platoon leaders then went to their platoons, gave them the briefings. They started to get ready, and then they marched out about an hour behind us.
Right. Okay. And so for you, I think as we were leading up to this episode, I think you had said you played Friday and Saturday, but not Sunday. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I played Friday and Saturday, but on Sunday, 2 of my teammates, they had a bit problems with exhaustion, and I think one had something on his foot. And we said, okay, there's no real use in splitting us up. And also the other 2 guys, unfortunately, we were 4 people in 2 cars, and each car had 1 person missing. So if it would have been 2 people from 1 car, we could have said, okay, you guys, you pack your stuff together, you leave, and we still stay. But this way, both guys would have had to wait 4 hours.
Yeah.
And so we didn't play on Sunday, which Sunday often is more of a big free-for-all because already many people are leaving, and it usually comes to one last glorious attack of the rebels at the task force base. And it's, like I said, a big free-for-all basically.
Gotcha. It's interesting you just mentioned when I was talking to Chaz and Sam and Nick about their experiences at Copperhead, one of the things that they have to deal with a lot is heat exhaustion. Like that for them is a big deal because it's easy to be well over 35 degrees Celsius. And even hotter than that when they're operating at Copperhead. Like it's 40 degrees Celsius is not unheard of. So what is it like for you in Czech Republic? I would expect that it's not quite that hot, but like, what are some of the other environmental factors?
Yeah, I think Copperhead is in desert, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get as hot, but weather can be changing. So basically, on Thursday evening when we arrived, right after we had put up our tents, which was really lucky, it started with a really heavy downpour, which continued until I think 1 or 2 in the morning. And then on Friday, everything was wet, but we had nearly 30 degrees Celsius and basically no cloud coverage. So it was pretty hot, combined with all the wet, humid air. That was quite draining. We as a recon team, we had actually get a water resupply by our company at one point because we just ran completely out of water.
Wow.
That day I had 3 liters with me and I went through them in maybe 4 hours, something like that. Then on Saturday, after it rained again on Friday evening, Saturday was a lot less hot, maybe 20 degrees, something like that. So basically perfect airsoft weather, 20 degrees. Okay, the ground was wet, but it didn't rain until the evening. So that was quite nice, actually, Saturday. Um, we also were pretty lucky because it always started raining right after we had put up our tents, right after we came back from a mission, right after we got hit, and we were back. So we had luck with the weather. I think other people didn't have as much luck and were basically stuck out in the field when it started raining.
And it's funny, like I'm curious about this. We didn't talk about this before, but you sounds like you do a lot of walking. Do you have any idea how many kilometers you walk during a Border War event?
Um, I think we did somewhere above 10 kilometers per day.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
So um, I think, yeah, we should have done somewhere 10 to 12 on Friday. And I know my teammates did 15 on Saturday, but I didn't do as much because I got hit and walked straight back to base while they took the long way around.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's you do a lot of walking, but um, we in our recon role did more walking than you would do as regular infantry because regular infantry has vehicle transports available at sometimes, so not all the time, but sometimes.
Yeah, I saw that in the rules brief. There's actually a few different types of vehicles, right?
Yeah, you have four classes of vehicles. Basically, you have a technical, which is just a truck with a machine gun on it. It has no armor. So if the windows are hit, or many people just roll down their windows and have, or don't even have windows in those vehicles, the drivers or passengers can also be hit. And those vehicles take one rocket hit to destroy, if I remember correctly. I can get into the rocket system after the vehicles if you want to.
Sure, yeah.
Then you have the cargo truck, which is usually provided by the game organizers. And I think the cargo truck takes 2 hits with the rockets. Then you have the juggernauts. Juggernauts are usually brought by players. So there are teams who own different cars that either are actual military vehicles, but that's not so often. I think a few years back, a British team rolled up with 2 Land Rover Defenders.
Oh wow!
But usually usually it's basically they take some type of 4x4 car and they add like wooden facades to make it look like a Humvee or stuff like that. And those juggernauts are considered armored and take 3 rocket hits. And then there's also, this year there wasn't because it had an engine failure, but usually they also have an old APC from the Czech army. And that one takes 4 hits to take out. And the juggernauts at APCs, they can move under fire, but only walking distance. And I think the juggernauts can only move backwards under fire, but I'm not entirely sure about that one.
And so you mentioned the rockets. Like, how does that work? Because I'm assuming most players don't carry around airsoft rocket launchers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically at Borderwar, unfortunately, thrown grenades and also like tag-in grenades are both prohibited due to safety hazards. One big thing there is forest fire danger or wildfire danger, I think it's in English. But yeah, the rockets basically work this way. You can be provided rocket launcher mock-ups by the organizers, or if you bring your own mock-up, you can have it registered by at the headquarters, and then you get a big orange flag for it. And if you want to fire a rocket, one person kneels down with the rocket launcher, and another person puts a reflective vest on, takes the flag, and runs up to the vehicle. So the person with the flag cannot be hit because they are the rocket which is flying at the vehicle. But the guy with the rocket launcher, they can be hit. And if you hit them before the rocket is fired, of course, the rocket will miss or isn't fired. Yeah, that's how the rockets work, which is a bit strange, but it works surprisingly well.
And I mean, that's a fair point about, the and I mean, like, for example, in Canada, like the tag-in grenades and pyro grenades are just not allowed. You can't have them. Like you cannot buy them, right? So it's I definitely understand being creative about game rules to be able to accomplish some of this stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah. So thinking about your weekend, what were aside from the recon that you were talking about, what were some of the key sort of like moments that stood out for you, like cool moments that you had?
Okay, so I think the best part actually for me was our company leader who, after the event, told us, "Hey guys, I was really happy with your performance. You did great work. You provided us with good intel when the radius worked, um, and like he didn't have to micromanage us or anything. He told us the objective. We came up with our plan. We got there and did our job. And I think like for me that felt really good to know like, hey, we could actually do something here and we achieved something. We helped our team and that felt really great. The other thing that stood out for me, which wasn't a good part, but in retrospect it was a funny part. I shot my own team leader in a friendly fire incident. We had a bit of a miscommunication because I thought he told me, "Hey, cover our other teammate while he checks the enemies we just took out," and that's what I understood. Which I didn't get was that he will also move up. We were on sort of like we in a downhill situation. I was farther uphill than him,
Hmm.
and he moved up below me, but I didn't realize that until in one bush I suddenly saw like only the silhouette of a ghillie suit,
Hmm.
um, exactly on line with the enemies we just took out. And I called out to the silhouette, and I didn't hear anything, so I started firing, and that was my own team leader, which was really shitty in that situation. But yeah, stuff like that happens, so we know we gotta improve our communication for the next time.
Hmm.
Um, Generally, like communication is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you all wearing ghillie suits on the recon teams?
Basically, my one teammate he always wore a ghillie suit. Our team leader didn't wear a ghillie suit, but he had very heavy scrim on his head, which in some parts even went down to his shoulders.
Hmm.
And I had my ghillies. I had also scrim on my head and a sniper veil over my shoulders, and my ghillie suit basically on my backpack for if I have to take up a position for longer times or anything. But I didn't want to wear it the entire time because it gets hot under that thing, even though it's only a ghillie cape that only goes up to chest level.
Yeah, I'm always really curious about ghillie suits because I mean I built a ghillie suit many years ago and I didn't use it very much, mostly because here in Newfoundland the forest is so dense, like you can't move through the woods wearing ghillie suit because you just get caught and stuff and you're just it completely defeats the purpose, right? So that's what I always wonder, like in a recon situation like yours, like the trade-off between the lower mobility and the higher sort of camouflage, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why none of us went with ghillie pants, and even the teammate who went with a ghillie suit also was only a half suit,
Hmm.
so it also went up to around chest level, hiding his head and his shoulders, which are the most exposed parts, which are easiest to recognize. And yeah, you can get caught in some things, but also with the sniper whale, I got caught in branches, and it happens. I think a lot of it is how do you move? Do you move slowly? Do you move carefully? Which definitely is a big part for us with recon. So
Hmm.
uh, we did nearly all of our movement not on roads or like we were either on small forest trails, deer trails, or even just like straight through the brush. So how to move is very important. Also, how to move silently,
Yeah,
which I
absolutely.
think we aren't the best at, but I think we managed pretty well.
Yeah, and it's so funny that we're talking about this because I'm writing an episode or a video that I'm going to record in very short order about concealment and camouflage and stuff like that. And one thing that's always stood out to me is how noisy people are in the woods. Like growing up, myself, I played in the woods all the time. And my grandfather was a hunter and he moved through the woods and he was very quiet. But when we started playing airsoft, 16 years ago or whatever, people in the woods, it was just so easy to hear them. Well, because firstly, you got people who just don't shut up, like they just talk all the time. You're like, I don't
Yeah,
understand. But also, like, just even moving around, people are not conscious where they're putting their feet. They're not looking at like branches. Or my branches, people wear a big pack and they duck their head down, but the pack gets caught in the branches, all this kind of stuff, right? So, even when you say, oh, we're not the best, well, I would say, even if that's true, you're still way better than the average person going into the woods for for playing airsoft.
I hope so. At least we got feedback from some other people in our company who were like, "Yeah, if we didn't know you were somewhere, like we only realized you were there when you stood up, raised your hands, and waved at us. Until then, we didn't know you were there."
Mhm.
And I think that's really good to hear. Um,
Definitely.
but even there, we have rooms where we can improve, and also sometimes that didn't work out the way we wanted to, like team kill incidents, for example.
Yeah.
Especially with our heavy camouflage, we were within regulations for task force. We wore helmets. Some of us even wore plate carriers. So we are well within regulation. But due to us using a green uniform, which is allowed, but so we were, I think all of us were running either Pencut Green Zone or Pencut Wildwood, the
Mhm.
camouflage. And it's allowed, but multicam is recommended for task force. So it's a bit harder to spot us as task force for our own people. And of course, the helmets are obscured by scrims. So we have a helmet on, but it's hard to recognize the helmet. That's why one of our teammates, he always had a sniper whale over his helmet. But
Mhm.
when we saw other task force units, he quickly took it down so they can see his helmet clearly.
Right.
So for friend foe recognition.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, in any situation, I think if players see something that they don't expect and they're not 100% sure that it's friendly, they're likely going to err on the side of I'll shoot at it first and see what happens. That's been my experience,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I can totally understand that experience because it just happens so often that you think, "Huh, that guy, I think he's friendly," and no, he was just an enemy who was looking the other way, and he turns
Yeah.
around and gets you.
Yeah. Have
Stuff like that. So
have you ever, this is a random, very random question. Have you ever spotted or determined that an enemy player was somewhere because you could smell them? Is that a thing that you've ever experienced?
uh, smell not, at least not not consciously. So maybe um, sometimes, but it's harder for me because I'm a smoker myself. But sometimes you smell like old smoke.
Yeah.
Smoking itself is at Borderwar prohibited unless you are in a designated smoking area,
Okay.
just because of the wildfire hazard. And they put pretty hefty fines on that, actually. Um, which I think is understandable looking at
Yeah.
the wildfires that the Czech Republic and also Eastern Germany had lately. So
Yeah.
um, no, I did not recognize someone by smell. What happened to me at one point, but that wasn't at Border War, was um, I saw like tall grass move in a very strange way, and I blasted it and it got two enemies.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
the reason I asked this is because when I was writing this episode, this video that I'm going to be recording. One of the things I remember very vividly is we had this one guy who used to wear very strong smelling like deodorant, like perfume. And anytime you were downwind, you would know immediately, oh, yeah, he's, 10, 15, 20 meters ahead of me because I can just smell this perfume, which is not, it's Axe body spray or whatever. It's not in nature, right? So I just thought I'd
yeah,
ask you about that.
yeah.
Um,
I think at like smaller games, I might have like caught the smell, but I didn't know, is it a teammate? Is it an enemy? It's just too many people in small space at smaller games.
Yeah, totally. So, just coming back to Border War, now, what do you think is the
Yeah.
most challenging aspect for Border War? So, someone who has never been to a game like that, what would you say is the most challenging part?
I'd say it's actually the walking.
Okay.
So you gotta walk a lot with your gear. with your gun, which, I mean, even if you don't have training plates in your plate carrier, and if you run just a very minimalist setup with only a few magazines, a radio, and your gun, and that's it. No all the cool things which some people
Hmm.
carry. Like, I don't know, uh, was it at Borderwar? I don't know. At some point, I saw a guy wearing like a huge breaching hammer, which, I mean, it looks cool. It looks super cool, but why would you carry that 3, 4, 5 kilogram thing through the woods at a place with no doors?
Yeah, really.
Um, but yeah, it's, I think, the walking, because you not only have to walk with that weight, but you gotta be fit mentally, even when you walk for 2 or 3 hours, because that's the thing. Sometimes you walk for 10 minutes and you get into contact, and all hell breaks loose, and you shoot and you play airsoft, and then it's over, and maybe you will continue walking, or maybe your company or your platoon took so many losses that you decide to go back to base. But it can also happen that you walk for 2, 3 hours without any contact.
Hmm.
But you gotta stay sharp, because if you have contact, you gotta be there. You gotta be able to move quickly, to get into cover, to fire back, to maybe do a moving retreat, stuff like that. So the walking and then suddenly switching to fast stuff, I think that's the
Hmm.
really tiring part.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess when you're packing for the event, you really need to make sure that you're taking appropriate footwear, appropriate, socks and enough socks to change and all this kind of stuff too, especially if it's wet, like you were
Absolutely.
saying.
Absolutely. Good boots, good socks. That's really, really important.
So switching gears now, you mentioned about how successful you were at Border War, but in general, sort of overarching for you, what do you think is the best part of Border War? Like, what is it that keeps you wanting to come back?
Um, for me, the best part is, one, on like a non-gameplay level, it's just meeting players from all over Europe, and I think some people even come from outside of Europe, even farther away. But you meet people from all different places. You get to talk with them about airsoft in their country, about how they got there. For example, for a lot of people from Western Europe, so Belgium, France, etc. It's hard to get to Border War because of the complicated German airsoft laws.
Hmm.
Because, to be like really short, basically, um, in Germany, only airsofts that were sold in Germany by a registered shop are legal. So if you want to take your airsoft from France to the Czech Republic, you either gotta go the way around Germany, or you gotta send them there by mail, or you gotta get like an exemption to transport them through Germany, which is complicated to get. Stuff like that. So I like talking with other players about airsoft, how it is for them, or yeah, that's just like getting to know the international community. That's the non-gameplay aspect. Um, the gameplay aspect for me is that it's so different to your regular skirmish. So
Hmm.
your regular skirmish, even on bigger fields, usually is okay. You are both at your respawns, and the referee blows his whistle, and you start running to good positions, and most people already know their positions, and you get in there, you try to do something. Maybe it works, maybe it fails, but it's very high speed.
Hmm.
But you get a lot of chances to try again, which, I mean, it's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But gameplay at Border War is different. It's a lot slower. Um, it's not as exciting.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, what you do counts a lot more, because you might only have this one chance to get it right. Um, you said I was successful. I wouldn't call it entirely that, because we had one situation. Um, we basically wanted to get to a point that was at our, yeah, sort of 1 to 2 o'clock position. And we had the choice of either walking 50 meters to the right and then 50 meters to the front, or
Mm-hmm.
walking 50 meters to the front and then 50 meters to the right. We chose the latter version and came out exactly in front of a prepared enemy position, which we stood no chance. They blasted us away.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, what you want to do if those guys lay still there, you basically don't notice them until it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
If we had moved the other way, so first 50 meters to the right, then 50 meters to the front, we would have gotten out behind them and would not only have been able to take out the position, but also their commander.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, sometimes that's what I mean with the stuff you do counts a lot more. This could have been a great success, but it turned out to be a big failure because, well, we had a 50-50 chance that we took the wrong one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like I often say to people, like when we're getting ready for games or whatever, it's like, listen, you have to do whatever you think is best. You can do everything right and still lose. Like that's a reality of airsoft. I mean, I was going to say of combat, and I have no experience with combat, but definitely in airsoft, I can say
Neither
for
do I,
sure.
but airsoft, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked a lot about walking. You've talked a lot about what you were just mentioning about how what you do counts a lot more, and I definitely understand that and appreciate that from a Milsim standpoint. Um, I guess my question for you is like when you look at videos and stuff of Borderwar online, there's a lot of highlight reel footage, a lot of like content creations and all this kind of stuff, and there's a lot of exciting moments. But what is it that makes up the bulk of the experience? Is it that sort of like tension while walking? Is that really the main experience?
Yeah, the tension while walking is a big part of it. But also the other thing is proper planning, like the communication between the company leader, the platoon leaders to their squads. You have to communicate while you're on your way to the objective. So we as the recon team may be already at the objective and observing the objective, relaying that to our company leader, who then gives according orders to his platoons. You have to communicate like, okay, if you get there, there will be, for example, task force special forces. So don't be surprised if you see someone. And then you get there and it turns out, yeah, there are task force special forces, but there's also a big detachment of enemies, which we didn't know about or stuff like that. And like all that communication and working together as a really big group, because for me at day games, it's unusual to have more than 4 or 5 people on my radio and like work together closely. I mean, I try to organize all the players that are in the spawn at the moment, stuff like that. But it's different when all of you go to this event. You have your own team, other teams, and basically everybody comes there with a different idea than to a day game. Because at the day game, it's basically, I mean, I show up at a day game in my Stargate loadout, which is definitely unpractical, and I wouldn't play that at a Milsim. And everybody is like there with a bit of different mindset and more interest in working together, achieving a goal together.
Yeah, and
also,
it's interesting.
Did I mention walking?
Yes, yeah, you did. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We heard the same thing from Sam, Chaz, and Nick. When I was speaking to them last week, same sort of deal. Like you do a lot more walking during a Milsim than you do during a regular weekend game. But I think your point about communication is so important. Like whenever you have, especially a large group of people, like you're talking 500 players or what have you. I think you were saying they capped it at 1,000. That's a lot of people to coordinate, right? And the minute that you don't coordinate, that's an opportunity for friendly fire, like you were talking about, for things to get confused, for you to lose sight of what's going on the field, especially for your, platoon leaders and commanders who are not physically there necessarily looking at the action. So, I mean, I definitely take that. I think it's hard to understate how important communication is. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Communication is key.
So I guess for last question that I had for you, and we talked about this with Nick, Chaz, and Sam a little bit, and I know that Novrich is a pretty polarizing personality on YouTube, on Airsoft, on the Airsoft subreddit, etc. And I'm not looking to get into that particular debate. But there's no question that having well-known content creators in attendance at these types of events changes the atmosphere for certain players, because either people pay attention to them, right, because they want to meet them or what have you, which is fine, or because they themselves are looking to get something from this event in terms of content creation and stuff like that. And I think, Sam was telling us a little bit about his experience with his squad and Alphonse and stuff like that. So what was your experience with that at Borderwar, either directly or indirectly?
Honestly, I didn't see much of Norwich and his team. They were there at the final, at the commander's speech in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I never saw them again, which is a bit strange since in the official roster, they were part of Alpha Company because most of his team is from Austria.
Right.
So they would have been part of our company, but I didn't see them after the initial speech, and they didn't sleep in our koi base. They didn't play with Alpha Company. I saw the Novrich video that he released lately. So he had some kind of special mission from the event organizers, which I guess, yeah, both of them profit from that. But it's a bit strange that when the organizers already planned to give a group of YouTubers a special mission or something, that they then still put them in the roster for one of the companies.
Mm-hmm.
Because then the company gets, well, it was only, I think, 6 or 7 people, but still it's 6 or 7 people less that the company has. That's half a squad.
Right, that makes sense, yeah.
But I think that's more on the game organizers than Novrich himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that the organizers could have done that a bit better. Other than that, I did see them in their shop on Tuesday, but didn't look too closely because I wasn't that interested. And I don't know what they did on Friday and Sunday and Saturday. They probably played. So yeah.
But definitely not a disturbing presence one way or another, right? Yeah.
Didn't notice anything like that. But I didn't have much contact with them anyway because, like I said, I only saw them at the final, at the beginning speech and then in the shop. Apart from that, well, we were a recon team. We were out there in the woods.
Yes, that's true. But
the idea was basically not to see our own people. So
yeah, and in that respect, I think you were very successful. I think it's interesting though, because it does really highlight again something we've talked about many times on the podcast and in person, and which is that what you see of airsoft on the internet is not what airsoft is actually like for the vast majority of people, right? If you watch Nalrich's video on Borderwar, expecting that will be your Borderwar experience, you are probably not going to end up doing that, right?
Yeah, probably not. It's like some of the roleplay elements he did show can happen to you, like being captured and brought to the village for some kind of sacrifice. Yeah, that can happen to you actually, because this year's storyline had some kind of cult activity in it, but due to my role this year, I basically never was in the village. I just walked through the village at one point where we, like I said, just walked straight through it while some weird ritual was going on where both task force and rebel players were both in the crowd cheering on the ritual. So no idea what was going on there. The role, I mean, I would like to try out the role play. This year it didn't really work out because of our role. And last 2 years, unluckily, our company only was in the village when heavy combat was going on. So we didn't have time for the role play. But I think they changed it a bit this year so as not to have a lot of combat missions directly in the village. Gotcha. So that the companies have a bit more time in there to engage with roleplay, because when you register at the beginning of the event on Thursday or Friday morning, you actually get a roleplay mission. Each player gets a small roleplay mission, which you can try to fulfill and get points for your team.
Oh, cool. Excellent. So can you give me an example? Like, what was yours?
Oh, man. Where is it? I still should have it somewhere, but Oh God, I can't remember. It was some type of interaction or something. I th- no, my teammate was supposed to talk with the village shaman, and he actually managed to do that because, funnily enough, we met the shaman outside the village at some point,
Okay.
and so he was being escorted by like four other villagers, and our team they started talking, and one teammate had that mission, so he could do that if I remember correctly.
Oh, excellent.
At
Okay.
least they had one mission to talk, I think, with the shaman, but I'm not entirely sure. And yeah, that's like the type of missions you get. And you can get, for example, also get additional revives out of that mission if you manage your mission and you are wounded at that point.
Hmm.
Then the villagers can remove your bandage and you are back to being able to be medicked once.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So I know I said that was the last question, but I do have one final one. What is the social scene like? So I understand, like you said, you set up a camping area, or you can go to the other camping areas. So, and I know from looking at the brief that you don't do, and there's no overnight, like there's no overnight activity, like no raids, like nobody's coming at 3 o'clock in the morning to shoot you in your tent or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. They changed that a few years ago. Until then, it was allowed to attack the camps at night. Now they designate an area of the game of the field as the night game area, and then everybody who wants to do night games goes there.
Hmm.
Um, the last 2 years, the task force camp, I can't really speak about the rebel camp, but the task force camp was set up in a large square surrounded by I don't know how to call that stuff, like building site fencing, like this wire fencing on concrete posts,
Okay. Yeah.
on which they fixed sort of a white cloth, which was a wall that you couldn't really shoot through, and that big square was great because you had like a large area in the middle where you had your water tanks and a cooking and smoking station and all the toilets. So all the people from all the different companies met there when they cooked or when they smoked a cigarette, waited in a line for the toilets, stuff like that. This year, unfortunately, the task force camp was pretty stretched out. So our company, Alpha Company, and I think it was Charlie Company, were basically in our own camps because we were separated from the main camp by a really thick brush,
Ah, okay.
which we then had like a small smoking slot at our place. But for cooking, you still had to walk into the main camp. And this way, also, the toilets were a lot farther away than the last 2 years because the last 2 years they were, like I said, in the middle where everybody has more or less the same distance to them. And now from Alpha to the toilets, we had to walk, I think it was around 200, 300 meters, which isn't that bad unless it's like the middle of the night and you get up because you have to go to the toilet and you are cold and you don't want to put on all your clothes, but
Yeah.
you gotta
Yeah.
go to the toilet somehow. And yeah, that's a bit stupid then. But yeah, I think the layout this year wasn't as good because it also left us open to attack because right next to the base camp was a hill. So the rebels could get on top of the hill and then shoot down in it
Oh.
during the day because during daytime it's allowed to attack the base camp. And that was unfortunate. But yeah, the social life, you meet people there when you're cooking your food, when you're having a smoke, when you're waiting in line for the toilet, or when you just randomly bump into each other or something. And you go like, "Hey, cool! Is that a first generation UF Pro Striker pants?" Yeah, it is. And you start a conversation about that or something. It was a lot of fun. The event, I can definitely recommend it to anybody. Just with the caveat of it's gonna be exciting, but it's gonna be a lot of walking. It's you will have your really tense, fast moments, but those are only moments.
Hmm.
It's not like your day game where you have action 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Also, read the rules.
Yeah,
it's good to know the rules beforehand, especially like medic rules, stuff like that.
fair enough. Well, listen, Ambo, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome to hear a little bit more about what airsoft is like in Europe. Thanks for sharing your experience. Guys, if you're enjoying this type of content, if these are the kinds of conversations that you'd like to have, join us on the Discord. The link is in the description. We have an amazing international community there, full of people who are just willing to share their thoughts, ideas on guns, gear, teching, impression kits, everything else. And we would love to have you join. But until then, that's all we've got for you. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll talk to you next week.